Can storytelling improve resilience? As I've said in other videos, before they were therapists, they were storytellers. Storytelling is probably older than Homo sapiens, and the oldest stories are folk tales, which incidentally most people would categorize as fantasy. I've been saying this for years now, though. Fantasy stories are not supposed to just be about wish fulfillment or escapism. Yes, they often are, but they are not supposed to be. The best stories are probably still told because they don't just entertain us for a few minutes. The best stories survive thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years of telling. Mythographer Wade Witzel, for example, in his massive work, argues that the Seven Sisters folktale about the Pleiades is possibly over 100,000 years old. So why could a story last so long? I mean, a merely entertaining story would not last that long. It would be replaced by something else. And what does entertain mean anyway? I mean, storytelling experts all over the internet have been trying to sort that out for years. And before that, before the internet, they were still trying to work it out because there's potentially a lot of money in it. So this is a huge industry. But given the recent slump of big blockbusters falling flat on their face and losing millions of dollars, like, I don't know, Marvel movies, Disney movies, Star Wars, blah, 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 it's obviously the case that they haven't figured this out yet, exactly how to do this. And I think it's going to be quite difficult to do so, even in the end, because much of our innate psychological tendencies are tangled up in the process of storytelling. And one of these is one I wanted to talk about today that I think contributes to the survival of some stories like folk tales and other fantasies. And that's the possibility that stories can actually foster resilience by the way that they tend to depict characters in peril. I came across a really interesting study from the journal Science. It was published this year in 2024 by Mondolini et al. And it talks about observing others in distress. And this is something that's called emotional contagion. Watching others who are in peril or are being harmed can actually foster resilience in the observer, according to the study, which I'll link the study below in the description. Interestingly enough, we actually have a good idea of what the mechanism is. It's the serotonin in the release of the small area of the brain called the habenula. Promoting resilience is something that has been a hot subject in trauma literature for a long time, and it's still a difficult subject. We're still trying to figure out exactly how the trick is done. This study shows that subjects that observe others in distress are less vulnerable to depressive despair responses when they themselves encounter distress. And when you look at the wider view of studies that look at this phenomenon, this social contagion business between individuals actually extends across different diverse modalities, including food safety, pain, learning, and in this case, emotional state. In this current study, the link is below, we saw that simply observing another suffering can help the observer deal with future adversity that they have not yet experienced themselves. And this happens because an innate social contagion mechanism in social animals appears to be designed to modulate resilience and make the subject less vulnerable to despair in the face of adversity in the future. Now, these studies were very rigorous and invasive, and so had to be done in mice, which, despite their differences between us, are actually quite similar to humans in many respects, at least in the area that they were studying in this particular case, these emotional centers and the social centers. So, how does this relate to storytelling, you might ask? Well, consider that in most serious stories, the main character is often put into dire peril. And more often than not, the main character of a folk tale is put into a literal life or death situation. Then they are hammered by all kinds of adversities. But more often than not, the character makes it through to the end or at least achieves a victory before she or he dies. Meaning is therefore achieved, which is always the point. Remember, we can endure an incredible amount of suffering and pain if we're able to find meaning in it. Pain can therefore be mitigated by meaning. Meaninglessness, however, cannot be mitigated by anything else outside the successful achievement of meaning. Meaninglessness is perhaps the worst horror that anyone can face. The bright lights of a fantastical story will be brighter than anything the audience will ever encounter, just as the darkest horrors will likely be far worse than anything they will encounter as well. It's not likely that anyone will ever face a xenomorph or a Balrog, or, as in my story, King of the Forgotten Darkness, a terrifying wolf man who can step out of your nightmares. It's likely that through the process that we talk about in this video, though, that listening to such stories can actually foster resilience in the audience, interestingly enough. I'll leave you with a quote by C.S. Lewis, who was defending fairy tales as something to be enjoyed by humans of all ages, not just children. Here he says, "Since it's so likely that children will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. Otherwise, you're making their destiny not brighter, but darker." See you next time.